we have spent a few weeks now on what I would call kind of the great faith, doubt, and determination series as it relates to our Zen practice. And those are considered three of the pillars of practice, three of the key factors that take us through the eye of the needle. Great persistence or determination, not giving up. And we've got moving boxes in the frame too. Nice. Not giving up even when faced with a mountain of moving boxes. Great faith, and the way we've articulated that is not blind faith, but the understanding that each of us is awakened, each of us has Buddha nature, and our job is really to realize that and manifest that. And then doubt, somewhat a funny word in the sense that how we usually think of doubt is almost in a very negative, pejorative, non-believing, skeptical way. It can have that quality, but really it's more about what are the questions, and with what determination and faith do you dive into those questions and keep the question alive as a spark for your practice. Today I wanted to talk about some specific questions which people often come to the practice with or face at some point in their lives. And the questions go like this: who the hell am I? What is this? What meaning does my life have? Where is this going? What is possible? Of what am I actually capable of accomplishing? What do I want to leave behind when I leave this particular life? Of what am I capable? And to do that today, I want to stray a little bit into the secular and sports, just as an example. And I want to talk about two numbers in particular, the number 67 and the number 41. And by the end of this ramble, those should make sense. And though I am going to tell a personal tale of running, because many of you know that that's been a big part of Lori's and my life for hers for decades, mine more recently. But as I tell this story, I want you to keep in mind this great doubt, determination, and faith idea. And then also see where you see Zen practice for yourself in the story. So let's start at mile 67. Mile 67, a couple of years ago, Ken was there, Lori was there, Mary, who's not on the call, was there. Mile 67 of a 100-mile race. This was my second attempt at running 100 miles all at once. And this was at the Stagecoach 100 race, which runs from roughly Flagstaff, Arizona to the rim of the Grand Canyon, 100 miles. Mile 67 for me occurred at about 1 in the morning. I think it was about 1 in the morning. And it was not a good moment for me. It was not a high point in this event or in my life. I had run that first 67 miles by myself, other people on the trail, but by myself on the trail. And by the time I came into mile 67, I was, I think it's safe to say, hypothermic, completely done, cooked, out of energy, out of faith, out of any belief that this could be done, physically destroyed, mentally destroyed. yeah, I'd say spiritually pretty destroyed too, in a very, very, very dark hole. Now, running these distances is kind of a funny thing because I remember coming into the mile 35 aid station, and Lori and Ken were there because there's different points at which your crew, your Sangha, your crew, can meet you along the way. And I remember coming into mile 35 going, I am so exhausted. And Lori smiled and said, only 65 more to go. And somehow we got me out of mile 35 and to mile 50. And then this mile 67. It was a dark place when I came into mile 67. A woman who was a younger woman who was running the race also, and we had spent about 18 miles on the trail together, running and hiking and chatting, and so we were kind of each other's support system for about 18 miles in here. When I got into mile 67, she had gotten ahead of me, but she had crawled into a sleeping bag and was in a fetal position next to the fire, and she never came out.
Well, she actually came in, ahead of you enough in different shapes of being the fetal position, just saying that she was done. And she wasn't the only one. A lot of people were coming into that particular place saying they were done.
Yeah, and so you can see some of the parallels here. A lot of people coming into this mile 67, which was a literal mile 67 in this case, but it's also a figurative mile 67 going, I'm done. Can't take it. No more. I'm cooked. And physically for me, it was just miserable. At mile 50, I think I ate a bunch of soup and some tortillas. They didn't really last long. I remember at probably mile 64, just a few miles out of the aid station where everybody's going to be, going, I don't know how I'm going to get there. I do not know how I'm going to get this next 3 miles and get in. And so when I got there, Ken was there and ready to go because he was going to pace me for the next 13 miles. And I just said, I don't know. And everybody's like, all right, let's get you fueled up and let's go. And I'm like, no, this is it.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, jump in.
So I jumped in and took Dan away, and I turned the car on and turned the heater on full blast and just sat there with him and just, listened to him.
Yeah, listen to me whine.
No, I helped you hear yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, so as Lori said, we got some food in me. We went into the car, which was nearby, and sat there in the heat. But there were some moments there where she was trying to help me through this. Ken was trying to help me through this. Mary was there too, and trying to help me through this. But I was in such a state of I can't and I won't that I could not hear them, see them, feel them, touch them. And put up this big wall between me and the world. And I remember when we were getting into the car or getting out of the car or something, I opened the door and the side view mirror hit Lori's head. And, it was just like one of those moments.
It's that time of night. You're supposed to be in bed.
You're supposed to be in bed. And I just it's like, I don't care anymore. I don't know why I'm doing this. This is ridiculous. There's no reason for any human to be doing this session. And I give up. And so I was pretty much in the fetal position in the car for a while. And then I started slowly coming around. And to my best of my recollections, my thought process was like this. You are not going to be happy with quitting. And there is a whole long string and team of people that have brought you to this place. There is Lori, who's there in the car. There's Ken waiting to go the next 13 miles. There was my coach, Ian Torrance, who is the race director of this particular race. And we had started our relationship in about 2010, the first time I ran the Trans Rockies race, which is 100 miles over 6 days. There's Ben Morris, who was just on the phone here for a moment, who had been with me through a couple of 50 milers and my first failed attempt at 100 miles. That was in Wyoming at a race called Bighorn with 17,000 feet of climbing up in the mountains of Wyoming. Ben and I called that race at mile 80. At mile 80, my hands had started swelling, which sometimes happens because of water and salt stuff. But then my forearms started swelling. And so the swelling was moving up my arms as we came into mile 80 aid station. And it was 102 degrees and there was a 2,000 foot climb ahead of me.
And what altitude were you at?
That's 8,000 or 9,000 feet or something like that. And prudence caused me at that point to hand over my number and quit. So 80 miles was as far as I had ever made it. Ben was there with me, and he agreed that it was time to quit and turn in my number. And of course, a half an hour later, I was like, wow, the swelling's gone. I could have gone, and you never know. And when I got to the next aid station by truck, Lori was there waiting and ready to go, but that day we did not go. So, here we are at mile 67. So I'm thinking of Ben and having dropped out at mile 80 on Bighorn. It's called DNF, by the way, did not finish, DNFing. I thought of all the races that Ken had done with me, Mass 50, Moab to Slick Rock 50, which was my first attempt at 50 miles. And I made it to about mile 35 and I came in and Ken and Lori were there on the road and I kept going and Ken came up jogging beside me. He said, "So what are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm going to keep going." And he said, "You're past the cutoff time." And I said, "What do you mean?" And they time you, so for safety and for darkness. And he said, "There's no way we can make it." And I said, "Well, let's keep going." And so we kept going to, I think, about mile 42, where the next official aid station was. And Ken was running with me at that point. And then we were pulled out of the race due to time. So I thought of Ken doing that. And then there was one more 50 miler in there, Dead Man Peaks, which Ken again drove out from LA to New Mexico. And Lori was there, my constant crew in the Xterra, bombing along roads, trying to find the next aid station. In that one, I hit mile 26. We had already not finished the previous Mass 50. I hit mile 26 and I said, every step hurts. Every step is painful. Every step hurts. I don't know. And Lori and Ken both at that point just basically put food in me and turned me around and sent me back out on the trail. And that was the first 50 I ever finished. Now, we all learned something there, and this gets to what we call about keeping your practice sustainable. Mm-hmm. Because I did finish that race. I finished it with a stress fracture in my left shin that basically kept me out of running for a year. That year leading up to that, I had run 8 ultra marathons, which is probably excessive, but it was that moment of, I love this, I'm going to do this. I was enchanted by it. I will run everything, 8 ultra marathons. I finished that Dead Man Peaks, but I finished it basically having broken my own leg. Now, I bring that one up because in all of this, in running and life and Zen, we can be so determined that we can work to our own detriment. And that's where you hear me often saying, be kind and gentle to yourself. Yes, stick with this, but keep it sustainable. Yes, keep working at it, work through the doubt, and have faith that the finish line is there. But don't break your leg, literally. Okay, so here we are in the car, back in the car, freezing at mile 67. And all of this is finally going through. And I was like, you know what? This is mile 67 of thousands and thousands of miles you have run with all of these people. All of these people showing up and putting food in your belly and staying in bad, bad motels. Bad motels in the middle of nowhere. And at a certain point, this point I can't describe. I just got up. I just got up. I got out of the car. I went to the back of the car. I pulled on warm tights. I grabbed my down jacket. I said, Lori, let's go. I walked back to the aid station. I had another cup of soup. Ken was waiting there. And I uttered the words, 41 out. 41 was my bib number, and you announce your entry into the aid station and when you're leaving so that they can track you. And I have to tell you that that 41 out, uttering that 41 out and taking that next step was one of the most important steps in all of my training, both running and Zen, in my entire life, because taking that step out of the aid station at mile 67, a miraculous thing happened. All of the previous failures, DNFs, did not starts, not qualifying for junior lifeguards because I didn't get the swim done in time when I was 12 years old. All of the accumulated self-judgment and failures and baggage that I have been carrying with me for 50 some odd years, when I stepped out of that aid station and said, I'm going to keep going, 41 out, two things happened. First of all, the race was complete. That step out of the aid station was a step across the finish line at mile 100. It also was a profound moment that has stayed with me ever since, where I was able to drop all of those doubts and all of those fears and all of the judgment about my past failures and just step forward. Now, there were still 33 miles to go. Ken ran with me for the next 13 miles. And this is like now 2:30, 3 a.m. in the morning, and we're at altitude and on trails that neither Ken nor I have ever been on before. He's my pacer, is what that's called. Now, a pacer is allowed to be with you, to spot you. They cannot carry anything for you. They cannot physically feed you. They can encourage you. They can't pull you along with a rope, which is called muling. That actually happens sometimes, but they're not allowed to do that. They're just there. And somewhere, this is a funny story. You can make a metaphor out of this or not, but somewhere in that next 13 miles, and Ken, I'm sure you'll remember this, Ken was in front of me and I was moving along behind him on this really rough trail. And I'm like, Ken, I can't see. And he was like, just keep going. And I said, Ken, no, literally, I can't see. And Ken is one step in front of the other. And I'm like, Ken, I'm going blind. And he's like, the sun will be up soon. Just keep moving. And I said, no, Ken, I really, like, something's wrong. I'm going blind. And because I literally could not see. And then I realized what was happening. And we've all experienced this scarily behind the wheel of a car. is that I was moving along on my feet on a trail that I did not know and falling asleep. My eyes were literally closed, so I could not see. And so once we figured that out, we just had to keep me awake. And so we kept moving. And then at one point I said, Ken, I need to stop. And I basically did a dead turtle. I went over on my back with my pack on, and he's standing there above me. And Ken, maybe when I'm done with the tale, you can tell me what you were really thinking. But he was pretty patient. And then I knew that if I did not get up, this was over. So I got up again, and we trudged into mile 80, where Lori was suited up, and there was hot coffee, and she was ready to go to the next 20. Now, we've talked about Sangha and the people we know and the Sangha we hold tight. There was another young man there at mile aid station 80. He was waiting for his wife to come in, who was somewhere there behind me. And I was going, well, I'm ready to go, but I don't think we can make the cutoff time. So here I am facing the cutoff time again, this deadline. Now, in my mind, this deadline became real. All of a sudden, that deadline was insurmountable again. And I said, I'm going to go 100 miles, but I don't think we're going to finish in time to get the belt buckle that you get for finishing in time. And this young man said, how many miles do you have to go? And I said, it's 21 miles. He's right. And I said, and he said, can you average a 21-minute pace? And I said, yeah, I think I can average a 21-minute pace, because that's basically walking at that point. He said, get out of here. There's no cutoff. There's no deadline. You're going to finish. And so Lori and I took off. And it was a grueling 20 miles. Grueling 20 miles. Slow, boring, long climb out of that aid station, a lot of switchbacks back and forth. At mile 97, I think, somebody had set up a whiskey station, the final aid station where you could get water and a shot of whiskey, which I had a shot of whiskey. Don't know why, I'm not sure it helped. And then when we got within probably 500 meters of the finish line, we could hear cowbells and we could hear people. And Lori and I took off running. And if you watch the video, it was actually a great moment in our marriage to cross that finish line together and do a first 100-miler.
It was really fun.
So, mile 67. What does mile 67 look like for any of us? And then what does it take to call 41 out? I have certainly had these moments in my Zen practice. I have had definite moments in my practice of Zen, well into the practice, where I was done. I couldn't see it. I couldn't see why. It made no sense. I stormed out of the Zendo. The teacher was wrong. The teacher didn't know what was going on. This was just another religion. I'm too tired. A mile 67 in Zen. And sometimes that moment was just a few minutes in the middle of a sesshin, a slamming down of the oryoki bowls, and then the rest of the Sangha laughing, and then you pick up and go again. And sometimes it was a couple months or a few months or a year of disappearing. Or sometimes it was showing up and sitting on the cushion, but not really being there. And then you find that place and call 41 out again, where you step back into the game and you reunite with the intimacy of the practice, and you reclaim the faith that there is a finish line, that there is this thing called being awake. There is a more peaceful, joyful way to live. And so you keep going. Even in the face of the great doubt, you lean on determination. So running, skiing, Zen, yoga, there are a million ways to go at this. But in the end, the questions, who am I? Of what am I capable? How will I get there? And with whom? Who will I surround myself with in the pursuit of this unreasonable exploration of Galen's edge of the unknown? Who's going to help me get there? How am I going to do it? When determination fails, will I remember faith? When faith fails, will I remember determination? When doubt creeps on, will determination or faith keep me going? What will be my 41 out of the aid station? And where is the Sangha? Where are the Kens and the Bens and the Pauls and the Lauras and the Lories and the Marys? How will I honor them? How will I remember them? Where is the Melissa and the Tall and the Art and the Marsh and the Tracy and the Charles and the John Hopper? When I feel like, again, I cannot do it, am I going to walk away from Indra's net, from all these pearls in my net that I have woven and we have woven together? It's a powerful thing. What part of the net will I be? Who am I and what am I capable of? How will I get there? And who will I go with? So I'm going to bring my talk to an end there and see what that brings up for people. Hopefully it's not a self-aggrandizing talk of success, that there's enough failure in there and learning to temper it. Ken, I'd love to hear anything you have to add, and I'm sure others would as well, but I will open it up and see where we go from here.
Yes, Dan, thank you for the opportunity, not only to speak, but also to be a crew member. What I remember of those 13 miles is I could not believe how dark it can get in the middle of nowhere. But what I remember are those glimpses of the moon when the canopy allowed us to see it. That was, I've never seen a more beautiful moon in my life. The other thing I remember is the bugling of the elks.
Yes.
And I heard something, and what the heck was that? And you, Dan, said, did you hear that? And I said, yeah, what is that? And you said, an elk. And of course, I had never heard an elk before. So that was a treasure beyond belief. And yes, Dan, the sun did come up. And there is no way to explain the power of the sun. There is just, the sun is it. The sun is it. And when that sun came up, we were no longer on a tiny little trail following a tiny little circle of light, and everything else was gone. Because literally in the middle of that trail, everything else was gone. There was nothing to my right or the left. All I could see was that little circle of light. And then when I was behind you, and then when I decided that it would be better for me to be in front, then all I had was the light. And I did break a rule, though, in those 13 miles, Dan. I did pull you up off the trail and say, let's go. So in that sense, I did aid and abet. but I was going to be damned if I was going to leave you lying on the trail. So I said, come on. And off we went. And yes, Lori was waiting, and I told Lori, just keep up this pace and you're going to make it. And as the guy, the aid station manager, whoever, somebody from the race organization told us, was that we had actually, based on your pace into 67 and coming out of 80, we had actually gained you some time, which blew my mind. So I said, oh my goodness, you can make it. And off you went. And yes, I remember that hill coming out of 80. I was like, are you kidding me? I mean, driving up that hill was something. So anyway, I was thankful for the experience. And what I really came away from that with was that I had a role to play, and I played it to the best of my ability. And that role was support and to get you to 80. And so in that sense, I was able to do it and see you come down the hill at 100 was one of the best things ever. So thank you for that experience. And yeah, I've been at mile 67, a few hundred times. And yes, I've been very lucky to have had people actually pull me up off the trail too. So I'm grateful for that.
That's awesome.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks, Ken.
That is so beautiful, such a beautiful metaphor of that following that tiny little light, circle of light, that moon, and then coming into the sun,
Right?
you know, which is everything. That was so beautiful.
It is so powerful. Big ball of fire.
I remember Ken. I remember Ken saying repeatedly, and this is a lot like practice too. Keep going, the sun will come up. When the sun comes up, everything will be different. And I was basically like, yeah, and and the horse you rode in on. I did not want to hear that. I didn't believe it, and yet he was right. And there is a very tendency, it's when you're wearing the headlamp and it's pitch black. It is a great metaphor because there's light, but it's very, very limited. You can't see more broadly, and it's almost like a hallucination at a certain point. So, thanks for picking me up, Ken. Any other thoughts, questions?
Okay, I'm just gonna go for it. I really relate to the punishing aspect of things, and I think I'm working that out right now. How not to break a leg, but still be totally dedicated. Like I have a tendency to neglect myself when I'm en route, and I can only see what's in the little light, and I don't see everything else, and I neglect myself because and so it's just like that refinement of character almost thing. It's like, how do I balance this? How do I be really, really dedicated? But you can just get so obsessive that you neglect yourself. And I just feel like it's hard to know sometimes when you're being too punishing.
Yeah, that's why I a few talks back shared the list of 16, kind of guides or 16 measures of how are you doing, and I think number one was, are you well?
And I was going to say pain is a really perfect indicator.
Are you well? Are you eating well? Are you physically, and there is a certain amount of challenge and discomfort because we are challenging our way of seeing things in our Zen practice, our previously understood way of seeing things. And when you start dismantling that, that can be very challenging. I love the way Tenshin Roshi talks about it. He says, keep it sustainable. You know, I mean, keep it sustainable. Because if it's not sustainable, then, you know, you also don't get there. It's, I mean, to just continue with the racing metaphor, if you go too fast off the finish line, I mean, too fast off the start line, you can't make the finish line. My coach, for many of the races, said, I want you to go to the back of the pack at the starting line. And I want you to walk across the start line. And I want you to let everybody else go out ahead of you before you start running. He said, preferably let people get 5 minutes ahead of you. That is so hard to do, especially if you're me. And yet on the races where I walked across the finish line, start line at the back of the pack, those ended up being some of my best performances because of that self-care and the pacing. Tennessee, you can also create some rules once you get to know yourself better. For running, what I did after the stress fracture, because here's the thing, doctors and other runners and other Zen students will tell you things like this. On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is the pain? And I go, hey, you know, 2 or a 3. And they'll say, well, anything under a 4, you can keep going. Well, that depends on what your scale is. What I discovered is that my ability to endure pain was off the charts. So I had to create a rule for me that said, I will not run on any pain. Now, not discomfort like sore muscles, but that kind of bone pain or joint pain or ligament pain, I had to create a rule and I stuck to it and I still stick to it. If something's wrong, I don't go. I don't try to out muscle it, out macho it. And you could say the same with your practice. You have to find those lines because discomfort in pushing through is required. That's where the great determination comes in, but not at the expense of your health or your family's health or the people around you. So remember, another one of the things on that list were, how are the people around you doing? Are you inspiring others? Are you energizing others? Right? Because that's a really good measure too. Because whether it's Zen or running or whatever obsession, you can end up disappearing from those that you love. You know, I got to get my 20 miles in today. Sorry, I know you're sick, but I got to get my 20 miles in today. You know, you got to watch that. You got to watch that. What else?
I have a question. Many people today are, this is a question for you, Dan, how does this relate and how can you relate this metaphor to this question? Many people today are suffering with anxiety and trauma and doing different things to find their way through it. Where do you know that you're getting very close to a breakdown that will be followed by a breakthrough? How do you relate to that with this metaphor that you've presented?
Well, I don't know if in advance you can know that this is going to be a good breakdown.
I know.
That's a breakthrough. You know, I mean, that's where the practice comes in, so that all breakdowns are opportunities. You know,
right.
And that, like Suzuki Roshi says, life is one series of accidents. Mm-hmm. Andrea and I talked about this earlier this week. If you use all of those moments and catch yourself faster. because a breakdown is just a breakdown. What Tennessee and I are talking about is that addiction, that obsession that goes beyond that.
Oh, I think-
That goes through breakdown and beyond.
Yeah.
You already gone way past that, and you're still digging that hole.
Yeah.
You know, and I think the awareness of practice allows us to again be more gentle with the breakdowns, so that we go, oh, okay, pick myself back up off the trail,
So more forgiving.
sit again, forgiveness, back to one. You know, it's that self-care again.
Right.
Versus, at least for me, sometimes it's judgment that I'm not good enough that causes the obsession.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
Like that.
I relate to that so much.
Yeah. I think a lot of us do. We're thinking-
Trying to prove something to yourself.
Mel?
Well, first of all, I want to say I love the story and like that the detailed description of how that those experiences running were for you. I think there are so many. I can compare that to so many different parts of my life, where we want to be challenged, especially those that are on Zoom right now. If you're in Zen practice, you want to be challenged, right? A lot of it, I feel like, is a practice of doing stuff you don't want to do, like getting up at 5 and sitting when you're tired, but that's the practice. And so I feel like in life, there's so much of finding that place where you're pushed just enough, but not so far that you're breaking a bone. That could be in Zen practice. It could even be in relationships, like you want someone who's going to challenge you, but not to the point that it's like, not good for you anymore, or a job or a boss. And so once again, I feel like what I learned from Zen is it's in each situation it's different whether or not you're being pushed enough or too far, but the practice is having an awareness of that, like just like you were saying, Dan, like, why am I doing this? Why am I being so focused on this? Am I being obsessive? Just always having that kind of watch on what's happening, I think, and then deciding, person, place, time, and amount each time.
Mhm.
But it is that balance between challenge and too far with everything.
Thank you, Mel.
I mean, it's like the person, place, time, and amount is the discernment. That's like an umbrella of discernment that we can go back to.
Yeah.
And remember, this is where Sangha comes in, the net comes in too, because you can check with the pearl next to you. You can check yourself.
That's great, actually, because in a lot of situations, almost all of them, I feel like when you're in it, you start to lose sight of exactly what's healthy and what's not healthy.
Yeah. Remember me telling the story of being in New York at the dinner table and asking Lori and Nick, have I become mean? And when they both said yes,
Yeah, that's it, exactly.
sometimes it's as simple as asking a question.
Well, and really, really being honest with your questions so that we could be really honest with our answer and loving.
John, you're on the screen. Are you unmuted?
I'm unmuted. Oh, John Hopper or me?
You.
Oh, hello. So as you know, I'm a coach. This is what I do. And I find it, and I love the story and the connection and going through it with your wife and with Ken and Sangha and the metaphors it brings up. But given that I've dedicated the last 25 years of my life, not only taking the finest athletes in the country that I could find, but also recently taking disabled people through similar things, I'm frustrated in that I really feel like I should have something smart to say that really sheds light on all this. But the truth is exactly what you just said, Dan. How do you know that you're about to take someone through a breakthrough or through a breakdown that turns into a breakthrough? And you never do, even after 25 years of taking, people on this journey. You never know if you're going to kill them or not. And that's why every first practice, I sweat and I'm nervous and I'm reading, you know, the latest woo-woo book to figure out some new jargon. But the truth is, like, is what you said. And sustainability, blue collar, not trying to go to wave my Harry Potter wand to make you the greatest player or person in the world, but just to get you in a sustainable place. But for me, the thing that I think Yoshin helped me with so much was, it wasn't avoiding breaking your leg. It was, because that's part of it. If you're going to do this, that stuff happens, but it was skillful means around those issues and finding a way to, you know, get that autopilot to get us back on the course quicker. Like you said, I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed this talk, and I'm sorry for my ignorance, even though I'm so deep in this process, but that's the process to me. That's why we fall in love with it. And I align myself with those people asking the questions, not the people with the answers and the people that are selling those things.
Mhm.
So John, I want to give you a little bit more credit than you're giving yourself, because you've been doing this for 25 years, which in itself says something. And you've taken a lot of volleyball players through, you know, through the sand and on and off the court. What role do you think true listening and empathy plays?
I don't know why I'm feeling emotional. It's so hard, because your group is the support team to get you through the mile 67.
Mhm.
I'm the guy on the other side of the net who was the cold. So in loving these athletes, I had to give a one-legged veteran a 15-0 beatdown to show him that he had to get on the road. And I heard him in my heart, but it's the distinction between being your coach, which is a vehicle to get someone from one place to another, and doing the work for them and being their friend and being liked. And that tightrope is crushing. And that's where we come to, what's my philosophy? What am I here for? What is my commitment? So the role of listening is, it's everything. If you don't do that, you're a fool. But ultimately, the athletes have to do the work themselves. So really, it's meaningless meaning.
It's
So
so perfectly said, John, and a direct correlation to student-teacher relationship in Zen. Okay, because each of us has to get there ourselves. As Philip said some weeks ago, teacher's job really is to kind of point the way, you know, not to walk the way for you. The only little correction I'd put in on, from my point of view, to what you're saying, John, is Ken and Lori and Ben and everyone else and my coach Ian actually are playing that role, because when they just shove me back out, you know, it's a very harsh and aggressive move from a place of empathy. And remember, empathy is very different than sympathy. You know, empathy is being able to understand where a person is at, not feel sorry for them, right? And from that place of understanding, know what they need next. And I just want to honor you, John, because the very fact that I asked the question and then you said, I'm getting emotional, shows us that you do know. And it comes from heart. And that sometimes that heart is an arm around the shoulder. Another time it's a, what do you call it? A 50 takedown or, you know,
15-0.
Oh, 15-0 beatdown on JD Marenko in the
yeah,
middle of Oklahoma City in 100-degree weather.
yeah. You know, so sometimes it's a firm hand and sometimes it's a soft hand. And it's obvious to me that you've got it dialed in pretty well. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd just like to say real quick, I really appreciated what John said. In terms of my practice, my mile 67 came in the middle of when I was head trainee. And I kept going in to see my teacher, the Roshi, and he just kept telling me no. You know, we were working on a koan, and it got to the point where he was just yelling at me. You know, you're going to have to look at this differently. You know, and I was so insulted that by the end of 1 week, you know, my thing was I'd had enough. You know, and it was an odd kind of situation for me because I was going home on the weekends. I had business that I had to take care of in order to do this. So I would leave on Sunday afternoon and come back on Tuesday night to be ready for Wednesday morning when the work week started up there. And over the weekend, I determined I was going to go back, but I wasn't sure why. I had no idea why I was going to go back and submit myself to the abuse that I felt like I was getting. And somewhere the next week, some little breakthrough came through, and we started getting to the point we could talk again, and off we went. I remember years later, months later, 2 or 3 years later probably, I mentioned to him, I said, do you remember that, you know, all that yelling and thing that went down when that was going on? And I said, you know, that was real close to getting me to the point to just say, enough of this. You know, he goes, that wasn't for you. He said, that was for the people who come after you.
Whoa.
You know, sometimes coaches got to be tough. Sometimes they got to be tough, you know. Sometimes the Roshi's job is just to throw cinder blocks out in the path to make sure you're still awake. You know.
Amazing.
Interesting thought. One of the interesting things that just came up for me as you were saying that, Galen, is how, you know, there's this question, what am I capable of? You start discovering that there's no fixed measure. There's actually no fixed place. We think there are fixed places. Early, Lori was running the Hood to Coast 200-mile relay with a team of 12 women, and I was training with her. And I mean, this is years ago, I remember saying to Ken, do you think I could run 10 miles? I mean, 10 miles seemed like how would I do that? And he said, yeah, I think you could do that. And, you know, and so you go forward. I now see physical distance differently. Having covered that many miles on foot in one go, the whole notion of, you know, from here to the ocean, you know, is different. When we lived in upstate New Mexico or northern New Mexico, the distance from Abiquiu to Albuquerque was 90 miles. And, you know, everybody was like, oh God, I got to go to Albuquerque. But I knew that I could cover that on foot if I had to. You know, there's a recalibration. And every time you cross through one of these, every time you get through a breakthrough, it recalibrates what is possible. And that sense of time starts shifting. And those of us who have done sessions or long periods of sitting, remember your first one and how impossible that seemed? You know, and then you come out the other side and You look up at the sky and it's a completely different, brighter color, and you're like, oh, cool. You know, that's why there's babies born, because women have a baby and then shortly thereafter, the pain and everything is forgotten and just the joy of the child and the birth, right? So our training is also like that. Every time you push through another barrier, it's no longer a barrier. And I think that's for me, one of the most interesting quests in my practice is like, that I've discovered that there isn't a line. You know, we create a line, we create a wall, we create barriers. You know, that's why the Mumonkan is called the gateless gate. It's a gate you have to pass through, but there actually is no gate.